Hello friends, my name is JJ, and I have a lot of fun books all about American trivia. You know, books designed to educate and amuse with all sorts of fun facts about the big, diverse US and A. These things will inevitably have all of these facts about things like state birds and state flags and state license plates and all of that. But I've noticed another thing that they really like to document is the names of what you call the people from the various states. This is an interesting topic because it overlaps with something else we've been discussing on this channel lately, which is the weird rules of the English language. And this is because the words that we use to refer to people who come from specific places are not always formed in predictable or even logical ways. Like someone from Canada is Canadian, but someone from Japan isn't Japanian, they're Japanese. And someone from Monaco is Monegasque for some reason. And so it is true with the names of the people who come from the 50 states, which are also not always predictable or entirely rational. And so today we are going to look at what the people in the 50 states call themselves. But I have also decided that I am not going to rely on what some crummy old book tells me. These books never cite their sources, and I have personally always been a bit skeptical of some of the weirder names for people that they claim are correct. So instead, I thought we would refer to a good primary source, specifically State of the State speeches given by state governors. You see, just as the president gives a State of the Union speech every year, so too do the state governors give considerably less watched State of the State speeches every year. And just as the presidents address their speeches to the American people and spend all of this time talking about what they're doing for Americans,
a record number of young Americans are now employed.
Millions of Americans can now save thousands of dollars.
So too do the governors spend a lot of time in their speeches talking about what they're doing for their people. And the rules of language being what they are, this usually requires referring to the people of the state by some sort of collective name.
I'll be submitting a proposal to put money back in the pockets of Californians.
And the rules of politics being what they are, governors tend to favor using language that will make them sound like an ordinary person who is aware of how normal people in that state talk. So I've looked at all of the recent State of the State speeches of all of the various governors, and I think I can now tell you with some confidence what America's leading politicians believe the people of all 50 states want to be called. All right, so in the vast majority of cases, state names turn into collective nouns in a relatively easy and intuitive way, simply because most states have names that consist of a single word ending with the letter A, and can thus be turned into collective nouns in a fashion similar to what we do with other places in the world that also end with the letter A. Like how Venezuelans live in Venezuela, or Australians live in Australia. So, we got Alabamians in Alabama, Alaskans in Alaska, Arizonans in Arizona, Californians in California, Floridians in Florida, Georgians in Georgia, Iowans in Iowa, Louisianans in Louisiana, Minnesotans in Minnesota, Montanans in Montana, Nebraskans in Nebraska, Nevadans in Nevada, Oklahomans in Oklahoma, Pennsylvanians in Pennsylvania, and Virginians in Virginia. A couple of states have names ending with O, and some of these are turned into collective nouns in a manner that doesn't really follow standard English practice. Like we say that people from Mexico are Mexican, and people from Morocco are Moroccan. You see, we usually get rid of that last O. But if their governor is to be believed, people from Ohio are apparently referred to as Ohioans.
I want to talk now about the health of our youngest Ohioans.
And people from Idaho are called Idahoans,
so we can save Idahoans their precious time on the road,
as opposed to Ohioan or Idahan. Colorado is the exception. Their governor calls their people Coloradans.
Nearly 300,000 Coloradans already just last year.
And not Coloradoans, which would be the name if we followed the practice of the previous two states. For what it's worth, in New Mexico, their governor refers to her people as New Mexicans.
because New Mexicans shouldn't have to decide between their medications and a meal.
New Mexicoans would probably be a bit much. Now, much like New Mexico, an additional 9 states have 2-word names, and 5 of these end with A, so they are conjugated in the same way as the previous ones. North Carolinians, North Dakotans, South Carolinians, West Virginians, and South Dakotans. But the ones that remain vary a fair bit. I knew that people in New Jersey often just refer to their state in casual conversation as just Jersey, so I was hoping that their governor would refer to his people in some equally condensed way, but no, he uses the rather awkward-sounding New Jersey.
That is an increase that will help more than 400,000 New Jerseyans better provide for themselves.
I was curious what people in Old Jersey, which is a British island off the coast of France, call themselves, so I looked up the speeches of their leader. He always just referred to his people as Islanders, which feels like a bit of a cop-out. In Rhode Island, incidentally, their governor refers to his people as Rhode Islanders, which I guess makes sense.
At that time, I asked my fellow Rhode Islanders to join me.
The governor of New York calls her people New Yorkers.
These are the reasons that I fight every day. To give New Yorkers a better shot at a better life.
Which seems obvious enough until you remember that people in New York City also famously call themselves that. For example, New Yorkers was the term that Mayor Adams used in his State of the City address, which is apparently also a thing.
And thanks to the hard work of this administration and millions of dedicated New Yorkers, the state of our city is strong.
A good example of just how confusing this can all get can be found when we look at Governor Hochul's congratulatory press release that she sent out in response to Mayor Adams' speech. It contains lines like, "The mayor's work to cancel $2 billion in medical debt will change lives for working-class New Yorkers." Wow, for people in the whole state? That's generous of him. But no, you just kind of have to assume from context when she is talking about New Yorkers in the city and not New Yorkers in the rest of New York. Remember, not all New Yorkers are New Yorkers, but all New Yorkers are New Yorkers. New Hampshire has one of the longest state names, and based on the speeches of their governors, there is no way to adapt this name into any sort of term for people. I looked at multiple governor speeches, and they tend to speak in a way that avoids referring to their people directly. If they absolutely have to, they usually just say, New Hampshire citizens.
A lot of New Hampshire citizens have answered that call to service. It's a proud legacy in our state.
I once again found myself curious as to what they say in Old Hampshire, which is a county in England. And I'm sorry to say that they haven't cracked this code either, with their government just referring to their people as Hampshire residents. For Delaware, I will let that state's golden boy do the talking.
Delawareans.
In Vermont, meanwhile, they use Vermonter, which I quite like. It sounds like a job, a professional Vermonter. People in Maryland are Marylanders, which sounds like a Mario character. Connecticut, much like New Hampshire, is a state with a name that doesn't seem like it's possible to turn into a name for people. In his most recent State of the State speech, their governor also seemed to go out of his way to avoid referring to his people directly, instead just saying things like we, as in this example.
What I love about Connecticut is not just what we've achieved, but also what we value.
In Maine, their governor used what might be the most charmingly uncreative name for the citizenry of any state, Maine people.
And it is because of Maine people, because of their undying and unyielding resilience and resolve in the hardest of times, and with the ingenuity and grit that are the hallmarks of Maine people. Now, Maine people do not welcome crisis or disaster.
I noticed that the Massachusetts governors tend to speak as if Massachusetts is the only place in the world and favor using unqualified collective nouns. So they'll refer to students, families, workers, even just people.
Another thing that means something to a lot of people that we did, we made history by pardoning hundreds of thousands of people.
Moving now to the Midwest, in Illinois, the preferred term is apparently Illinoisan, which sounds kind of Illinoising, if you ask me. I bet that's an overdone joke there. Wisconsin is the only state that uses the interesting suffix "ite" to describe its people.
To protect the forest for generations of future Wisconsinites to use and enjoy.
While Michigan people are called Michiganders.
Michigan is on the move because Michiganders are hard at work.
That's a weird one because they could have just said Michiganners, but they added a D, so it's Michigander, like a goose. People from Kansas are apparently called Kansans, while people from Arkansas are called Arkansans.
We've added 21,000 new Arkansans last year alone.
That's a fun one because it makes you pronounce Arkansas in a different way. If they were being consistent, they should just be called Arkansasans. Moving west, people in Utah are called Utahns, which is a sort of interesting word.
And made school choice available to all Utahns.
Ends with just an N, not an A-N, as you might expect. So it's not Utah-an, but Utahn, like John, as opposed to Jaw-an. So what would be your guess for what people from Oregon are called? Oregoners, Oregonians, or Oregonists? The answer is...
because that's what Oregonians do for our neighbors.
People in Washington state format their name in a similar way. Washingtonians.
Progress on the systems that Washingtonians depend on.
And much like New Yorkers, they also suffer from name overlap with people from a more famous part of America, since people who live in Washington, D.C. are also called Washingtonians, according to their mayor.
And giving more Washingtonians a fair shot.
Now, Wyoming is another state that appears to have no term for its residents. Their governor seems to favor just referring to people in Wyoming, or Wyoming's people, or the Wyoming people.
As well as to secure an appropriate economic benefit to the people of Wyoming.
I like the addition of that "the." It sounds very grand, certainly compared to just saying Maine people, which I'm sorry, still sounds so strange and caveman-like to me. Okay, so Mississippi, Kentucky, Texas, Tennessee, and Missouri are states with wildly different names, and yet they all use the "an" suffix for their people. Mississippian, Kentuckian, Texan, Tennessean, and Missourian. Once again, showing that "an" tends to be the American default, probably because the word American ends that way. This is actually a joke in Futurama. In the future, after America takes over the world, the people of Earth are called Earthicans.
My fellow Earthicans.
All right, and lastly, we have the two most unusual state people name situations of all. In Hawaii, you might think that the people there are just called Hawaiian, since that's a pretty common adjective that you hear all the time to describe everything from punch to pizza. But in recent decades, using Hawaiian as the term for everyone who lives in the state has become controversial due to some of the sensitivities over race and colonialism over there. The current thinking is that Hawaiians should be a name reserved exclusively for the indigenous peoples of the islands, while everyone who came later, whites, blacks, Asians, and so on, are people who live in Hawaii but aren't Hawaiian. In their governor's speech, he usually just says people of Hawaii when referring to residents, or sometimes just our people.
It provides an estimated $5.6 billion in total savings for our people.
But it's interesting because when he refers to the indigenous Hawaiians, he always says native Hawaiians.
And more native Hawaiians now live on the mainland than in our state.
Which implies that the word Hawaiian on its own still isn't intuitively understood to mean exclusively native people, and even an otherwise politically correct governor still has to use an additional adjective to clarify precisely who he's referring to.
A bold 5-year plan to deliver more than 7,500 homes and lots for native Hawaiians.
But the weirdest state of all, when it comes to the name of its people, is unquestionably Indiana. While many states in the US are named after specific American Indian tribes or nations, Indiana is the only state that is named after the entire broad concept of Indians, which then presented a unique linguistic challenge for the identity of the people living there. Under normal circumstances, it would be logical to just call people who came from a place named Indiana Indians, but of course, Indians are a specific type of people that most people in Indiana are not. So you could call them Indianans, which is a sort of bizarre linguistic formation, or something else entirely. And they went with something else entirely, Hoosier.
Despite all of that, what comes through most clearly when listening to Hoosiers is our resilience to keep reducing the income tax burden on Hoosiers. Hoosiers from all over the state told me every Hoosier family an opportunity for all Hoosiers.
I remember when I was young, I read the classic Kurt Vonnegut novel Cat's Cradle, and I was really confused because the characters are talking about Hoosiers all the time, and it wasn't obvious to me what that meant. Kurt Vonnegut himself was from Indiana, you see. But since the mid-19th century or so, Hoosier has steadily become the preferred title for Indiana people. And today, the name is used in all sorts of very formal and proper contexts that you might not expect for such a nicknamey sounding term.
And more unemployed Hoosiers are actively resuming the job hunt.
110,000 Hoosiers living with Alzheimer's.
270 Hoosiers died after contracting influenza.
So you're obviously wondering what Hoosier means and how we ever got from Indiana to Hoosier in the first place. And the answer is no one knows. It's literally one of the great unsolved mysteries of America. People speculate about it endlessly, and I'm sure if you go down to Indiana, you meet all sorts of folks who will very confidently tell you some urban legend that they were raised on. But from what I've been able to research, it is literally just some made-up word that emerged as a term to refer to Indiana people 200 years ago, and it seems to have stuck. I really should have done this as an iceberg video. Hoosier would be a great bottom of the berg entry in the names of people from American states iceberg. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this little tour of American state people names. It's kind of a funny coincidence that we don't even really have a good word in English for this concept itself. I'm finding myself more and more interested in some of the oddities of the English language these days, the ways in which a lot of the rules of correct English are extremely arbitrary and are just things you have to learn, as opposed to things that you could determine through some application of a stable set of grammatical principles. The unpredictable process of turning the name of a place into the name of a people is a great example of this, given it would be almost impossible to offer a coherent grammatical explanation for why people from Wisconsin are called Wisconsinites and people from Ohio are called Ohioans, beyond that these are just the words that we use. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, you might enjoy my previous 2 videos on weird rules of English, and let me know in the comments if you can think of any other weird English concepts that might be fun to explore. Until then, I will see you next week.